notes with you so you can understand this. So let's get started here. Oops, actually we're going to start with something called the Congress of Vienna. So we're going to have this meeting to deal with the defeated French Empire after Napoleon surrenders. A Congress is a meeting or meeting in the capital of Austria, the Austrian Empire, Vienna. So we want to kind of keep in mind, like, well, what did France do? Why do we have to have this meeting? What's the mess that Napoleon created? Well, the mess that he created is he expanded the boundaries of France. Look at these dark green states. He expanded the borders of France up here to the northern part of it, into what's labeled here Holland, down to the south into the Italian states. The light green states are satellites, so he puts his relatives in charge of those states. The purple states he's allied with for a period of time, and the people who really are kind of outside would be really just Britain and Russia. And I guess on this map it's, Russia here on the right, then Sweden, Britain, which includes England, Scotland, Ireland, and Portugal. But Napoleon, if you just look at the dark green, light green, the purple, he controls this massive amount of Europe. So he disrupts the balance of power in Europe, among the European states. His fatal mistake is when, of course, he invades Russia in 1812, and that's going to, within a few years, lead to his defeat. This is another way to look at this map. Now, I included this map. It's not my favorite, but they show you like some of the states really resisting Napoleon. I'm not sure they didn't put Spain in, but they're suggesting Belgium, the Netherlands resist Napoleon, and Prussia more. I'm not sure I understand, but really similar type of maps here. Once Napoleon's defeated at the Battle of Nations in 1813, he's exiled to Elba off the coast of Italy. Of course, that's my dream, to be punished and sent to the Mediterranean. But he's exiled to Elba. He escapes, though, and he comes back, which we'll talk about. Though once he's released from power, then who takes over but Louis XVIII? So you have the restoration of what was seen as a legitimate power structure in the French state, Louis XVI's brother. He escapes Elba, as I mentioned, in something that's called the 100 Days. And it takes a second defeat of Napoleon in order to, at the Battle of Waterloo, to really get him to surrender. The defeat comes after about 100 days of him coming back into power. It takes a coalition of the British, the Russians, the Prussians, the Austrians, Sweden, and some other smaller German states to defeat him. So this is the Battle of Waterloo. Of course, he's defeated by the Duke of Wellington we typically talk about, and a Prussian leader named Blucher. The second time he's defeated, he's sent to a small island off the coast of Africa, St. Helena. Here's his home. He'll stay for, I think he lives about 6 more years. So what I want to talk to you really about is, well, what do you do once Napoleon's defeated? So we have this meeting at Vienna, and it actually starts prior to him, like when he's on Elba. So he goes to Elba the first time and then St. Helena later. But they start meeting like in September 1814 and goes to June 1815. I mention those years or those months to you because it's almost like an entire school year, which is important. So this whole meeting takes a long time, about 9 months. And Vienna's a beautiful capital, and there's operas, and there's tons of social activities to go to at Vienna. So this is what we're going to end up once we get the Congress of Vienna finished. If you notice, we make France smaller. We reinstate the independence of what's called the Netherlands. We, in the center here, create something called the German Confederation. Sardinia, Piedmont is created. So Sardinia is the island, Piedmont here in yellow. Austria is the hostess for this Congress of Vienna. She was very powerful, and she will for another couple of decades here. So you see a very strong, a very large Austrian empire here. You see Prussia to an extent, and Russia. Prussia and Russia are kind of bigger over some territory we will look at. But what you have to have happen with the Congress of Vienna is you're going to re-establish the boundaries of these European states. The boundaries where Napoleon had taken this territory and absorbed it into, or annexed it into the French state, or put his relatives in charge of. So they have a big task, and this is where they get to. So who are the key players? Well, the British will be there certainly, but let's actually start with the host, Prince Clemens von Metternich. I want you to notice his title. He's a member of the noble class, and he's the Austrian. They're the host of the most, Metternich, a diplomat. We bring in the British, a viscount, that's actually a member of the noble class also. And then we bring heads of state in, the Prussian King Frederick III, the Russian Alexander I, the Tsar. And then, interestingly enough, the loser, here. The defeated state of France gets a say, and we send their foreign minister goes, who's actually, I think, a member of the Catholic Church, Charles de Talleyrand. Talleyrand is an amazing leader here because he gets, like, this defeated state of France gets a say at the peace conference, which is quite remarkable, and we do not see that in the 20th century. So here's a commemorative plate done at the time. Their objective is to undo whatever Napoleon had done. So they have to reduce its boundaries. Now, they were a little bit generous to France, and then Napoleon escaped from Elba, and then they reduced France to a little bit further in terms of her size. And they want to put back into running these states the kings that had been kicked out, those who had lost their thrones. So what they're trying to do here is look for an alternative to war, and this is diplomacy here. So they really had to turn back the clock and move away from that map of Europe when Napoleon had so much control over so much territory in Europe during the Napoleonic era. Coins are to commemorate this, and if we see any major peace talks or conferences in our time, we see similar things. The principles that we're going to follow will be these three in terms of Vienna. We want to return to a balance of power in Europe, meaning no one state has more power than others. We want to put the legitimate heirs to the throne that were there prior to the French Revolution back on the throne, and we want to compensate those who fought against Napoleon. Those will be the overwhelming ideas that will instill in the conference. They will also have occupational force in France for a short period of time, and France does pay an indemnity. They'll pay for the war about 700,000 francs. So, after the Congress of Vienna, we have some new boundaries, as I mentioned before. This is a little bit different map than what I showed you earlier, but this is from your textbook. But France is a little bit smaller. This German Empire here that's created is noteworthy here with the red. The German Confederation, it's called. Austria is fairly large here. You see the rise of Prussia. Don't forget about Prussia there in the yellow. It'll become a force to be reckoned with in the 1800s. Russia on the right, England or Great Britain here in the purple. So we're going to reduce France's territory, any land that Napoleon had taken. Russia's actually given some territory in Poland, which I had failed to mention to you guys, but Poland, as we said, back in 1795 was erased from the map. You can see Poland here. So Russia's given territory. Prussia's given some other territory, what's called Saxony. Now, we covered Saxony when we covered Martin Luther, but this is like German territory. And this German Confederation is created. So we don't quite have a modern Germany. That's coming in a week or two for us, but this is a step towards a unified German state. And Austria's given territory because it's the host here, has also played an important force, balancing or countering Napoleon all those years. Now it's interesting, we're going to build up some buffer states around France. We're going to reassert the neutrality of Switzerland. And Britain's given some territory not on the continental Europe, but Cape Colony in South Africa and other parts of Africa and Asia, which we're not going to really quite look at here, but Britain gets territory globally. We do see the renouncing of slavery. So this is 1815 here. And we also restate and reiterate support here for freedom of navigation for the rivers. Oops, sorry, too fast there. So I want you to notice on this map, we build up the Netherlands a little bit better. This German Confederation is created to kind of box in France here. Switzerland, we reassert its independence. And then this territory of Sardinia, Piedmont, is unified, this island and this territory here. All of those, the yellow, Switzerland, the German Confederation, and the Netherlands, those are all attempts to check in, to kind of push France into a certain area, or maybe even like a buffer state, perhaps is what I used. And so the Congress of Vienna does create a peace for about 100 years, which is fairly remarkable, and that is where I want to finish with you guys today.